it's a higher order understanding, and that is for a therapist to understand how they are bringing together theoretical approaches and in a very systematic way. Now they are thinking and working integratively.
I'm excited to continue on our journey of looking at the art of therapy. Yeah, and just looking a little bit back on what we touched on the last episode. So the previous one, we really started to have a look at the details of communication therapy, specifically how to understand someone else's frame of reference, and that's done through active listening and actually expressing the active listening, and then also with open-ended questions.
Very much. You also describe therapy as an art. That's what makes it remarkable, because it's an incredible human endeavor where one person with their knowledge training about aspects of humanity, communication, suffering, wellness, relating, interaction, where one person sets aside their own frame of reference or their own needs, engages with another to mobilize them, assist them to grow and develop. So it's an incredible process, and it is something of an art.
It really is an art. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then looking forward to today. So what we said that we'll start to have a look at is just how does understanding someone else's frame, how does that help a therapist in their journey? And how does that relate back to the person-centered approach that we touched on previously?
Yeah, it's great that you link back to what we're busy with, which is the person-centered approach. And how does the communication theory model relate? The key thing here is that the person-centered approach, as we've been looking at, always relates to the client and creating a very special kind of environment or relationship characterized by authenticity or congruence on the part of communication from the therapist, accurate empathy, understanding the other, the client, and doing that in such a way where there's no judgment. That brings about a deep sense of trust, and where the other person can become more of who they are. So the communication model shows us that through asking open-ended questions and by just actively listening to the other and reflecting that back by way of, we've said earlier, often emotions or feelings, but it's not limited to that. It's about really accurately listening, understanding, and communicating that back. Within that context, another feels understood, feels listened to, feels heard. They become visible. And increasingly, the therapist is on a journey with the client, understanding from their frame of reference. And that is profound, because what it means is the client can become more of who they are. And as they become more of who they are, they're going to self-actualize. And that process of being listened to and being seen enables enables the client to clarify, understand themselves better, and become more of who they are. So it relates profoundly to the process of empathy. And when you really listen to another and you set aside your own frame of reference, you're putting aside your own judgment. And that means that you're going to be able to communicate your understanding of their experience in a way that's without judgment. And because you're part of or trying to experience something of their frame of reference, it helps you to communicate that very authentically and increasingly accurately, and their empathy. And as that occurs, you have a therapeutic relationship where it's profoundly person-centered, and the client can begin to self-actualize.
Oh, that's amazing how these two these two theories, the communication theory and the person-centered theory, how they just absolutely complement each other.
Yes.
And it's almost like for me, if you understand both of them, you can't have the one without the other almost, because it's just amazing together.
Yes. What an observation. Part of what you've identified is what it means to work integratively. And what's so powerful about working integratively is that you actually have two very separate theories here. The person-centered approach was really developed by Carl Rogers without an awareness of the communication model, not with any significant inputs or understanding. And the communication theory emerged quite independently. And each of these theories in psychotherapy and psychology are tremendously valuable. However, if you begin to utilize them in a structured, systematic way with a higher order frame of reference or a higher order understanding, now you're working integratively. And you begin to see things that you couldn't see when you just adopt one therapeutic or one theoretical orientation. So, yes, these two fit together profoundly. And it also enables you as a therapist to realize, again, it's not wrong or right. What's going to be the impact of an open-ended question? And how does that achieve, or how does that enable one to get closer to the frame of reference of the other? And when you understand this from communication theory, you now see the benefit of listening actively and utilization of open-ended questions. And so suddenly therapy is not about, well, you've got to do it this way or that way. You can kick off a session with a directive question, but now from the communication theory, you know you're likely going to get a response and a way of relating from the client that says more about your frame of reference as therapist than theirs. And it's not wrong or right, but is that what you want to achieve? Is that what's going to be helpful? But now you're beginning to, the therapist can understand what they're doing. And that really is about the art of therapy.
Mm-hmm. It's combining the strengths of basically each lens, and how they, if you look at something through more than one lens, you get a bigger picture.
Yes.
And then it creates a space where you can maneuver more, and you can see more, and you can maybe assist more.
Yes.
It's not, like I say, it's not wrong or right, because each theory has its own place. But it is the more you know, the more knowledge you have. And when those two, they feels like they just fit so beautifully together. It opens up even more.
So much so. It brings a deep understanding, a much deeper understanding, and one that isn't available in that theoretical approach often. It's a higher order understanding, and that is for a therapist to understand how they are bringing together theoretical approaches and in a very systematic way. Now they are thinking and working integratively, not eclectically, not just adding here and there, not like a cookbook approach. No, actually understanding how things fit together and how this creates deeper understanding of the therapy process and of the client. And that is thrilling.
That is thrilling,
Yes.
agree. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's really with understanding how communications theory and then the person's theory really fit in together and fit together. The more you understand the communication model, the more person-centered you can become. And the more person-centered you are, the more the communication, you can facilitate the communication process.
You describe circularity beautifully. Uh, and that is really something all on its own when one starts to look at how things fit together and in terms of causality when it comes to human relationships and interaction. But it is profound that the two inform one another in this way. And so something more meaningful emerges.
So it's just adding to it. And you name the circularity, and it feels like there's even more to that. So because the communications model, it's such a communication theory, it's such an important development, but it seems like there's even more with the circularity that you're looking at.
Yes, very much. So let's hold that for the next episode, because the goal here is that we explore concepts one at a time, and so for clarity. So it's tempting to go ahead, but let's pause here and explore that one in the next episode.